Welcome to the Fright Lab. I'm Lucas Yoakum. It is the 21st entry into our 31 Days of Horror, 31 Days of Halloween, 31 for 31 challenge. It's spooky season, ladies and gentlemen, and tonight's entry is one of the spookiest entries. It's an entry I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and by doing so tonight, I've kind of shot myself in the foot just a little bit. We're talking about 1979 Don Coscarelli's Phantasm. I should leave the voice editing to Joe. I know that, but whatever. So, Phantasm. Phantasm is a film that is kind of part of that canon of greater horror films from the 70s and 80s when you think about Texas Chainsaw, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. Phantasm sometimes gets thrown into that list, but not enough, in my opinion, one, and two, maybe a little out of place. Hear me out. Phantasm is a movie that is almost impossible to describe. I mean, yes, it's a horror film, and it is a movie that is sort of paranormal. It is kind of supernatural in a way, but not in like and here's the vampire, or here's the ghost. It's never presented that way, and that makes it really, really almost endearing in its own kind of perverse way. So let's real quick knock the plot of Phantasm out of the way. Phantasm centers on a small town somewhere. Is it California? Is it Nevada? Is it Arizona? They never fucking tell us, and I'm not sure it matters, quite frankly. Phantasm centers on a small town encountering a shocking amount of grief. A friend group lost a member of its core to a brutal death. And what we don't know is that this group's also suffered a loss recently in terms of family deaths, particular brothers Michael and Jody being the elder, Michael being the younger brother. They are trying to make sense of this world that's rapidly contracting around them. And there's a lot of tension in the household. Who's really going to be running the house? Who should be the father figure in this case? All the stuff that you would expect, which would be hard enough if it weren't for the presence of a potentially supernatural giant tall guy who runs the local crematorium and cemetery and mortuary. Are you still on board? If you haven't seen Phantasm before now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell are you talking about, Lucas? Well, I got to level with you. I'm not entirely sure I know what I'm talking about here, because Phantasm is horror at its most interesting and its least apologetic. Not that it's exceptionally brutal or exceptionally gory. It's bloody and it's gross. I mean, sure, I'll grant that. But it is not the most extreme thing that came out during that time period. And compared to like the intensity of, say, The Exorcist, it's not that. It's a little too weird and it's funny, but it's funny in a way that's kind of awkward and out there and strange. The acting is mostly really good, actually, and the special effects, I still think for the era and the budget, look great. But this movie makes zero sense in terms of what it's trying to do. Like, it just throws a lot of storytelling rules out the window, and it is definitely about a vibe, but there's a plot, and it's not just a vibey plot. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense here? So Phantasm looks like a movie from the 1970s, and that is about the only thing that makes any sense about it, is you can kind of place it at the end of the 70s. But other than that, Phantasm kind of lives up to its name, Phantasm being a reference to dreams and dreamlike states. And while it is a movie that is actively like thumbing its nose at storytelling and kind of fudging on world building, is ultimately taking a big swing because the story is so weird. Supernatural, tall, skinny guy is terrifying, runs the local mortuary, and he's causing all sorts of bad stuff to happen throughout the town. Cool, show us some of the town. Phantasm says no. Phantasm says, tall, skinny, scary guy. He's real spooky. And we go, cool, tell us about him. And Phantasm goes, nah, we're not going to do that. Phantasm says, oh, there's references to tuning forks. And we're going to ask, cool, how does that work? And Phantasm says, fuck you, figure out the tuning forks yourself. Sort of, because Phantasm never really invites you to do anything. And that's one of the things that I actually like Phantasm for, is that it is immune to speculation. I've never heard a serious Phantasm fan ask the question, but who is the tall man really? Partly because it doesn't really matter, and partly because there is a shocking amount of sequels to Phantasm, most of deeply declining quality. After Phantasm 2 is very weird and it's fun, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Big shock. Phantasm 3 makes more sense in context, but that doesn't mean it's good, and everything after that is mostly not worth your attention, for what, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Don Coscarelli. I know you would frown on me for saying that, but it's true. And I want to do a full episode about Phantasm in terms of narrative, because I think it is actually doing something pretty cool. But that means I've got to write it, and I don't want to totally spoil everything I'm thinking about in this small episode. So I do kind of want to make a comparison, though. I want to kind of analyze something while I've got you here for a few minutes about Phantasm. I want to put it kind of in a historical chronology. So Phantasm comes out in 1979. John Carpenter's Halloween comes out in 1978, and Sean Cunningham's Friday the 13th comes out in 1980. So you've got Halloween, Phantasm, Friday the 13th, right? Nice, neat sequence. And you can kind of see in a way that there was something in the air at that time that was spurring on these kind of weird, extremely dark, and very out there horror stories, because all three of them have these deep elements of the fantastical, even though a movie like Halloween is actually kind of pedestrian in a particular way. One of the big things about Michael Myers, bless his heart, is that he is ultimately, at least in the first Halloween film, just a dude in a mask with a knife and a fucking plan. Everything after that is... We're not going to talk about the Thorn rune and what it has to do with Michael Myers, because that's insane and was a bad movie. However, I find that when you look at Halloween, which is very pedestrian but very scary and only plays with the fantastical, Phantasm comes next, and it is very spooky, very fantastical, not really rooted in reality, but is still... It has that same hit. It's got some good scares. It's got some weird moments. It's a very cool movie, and you can see how it has a sort of spiritual connection to Halloween. It's a little funny. It's a lot scary, and it's kind of over the top and doesn't get a lot of explanation. And then there's Friday the 13th, which kind of grounds itself, especially at the end. If you know, you know. I'm not going to spoil it here. Friday the 13th kind of grounds itself and tries to be entirely more pedestrian than it actually is, because the story's real weird and doesn't make a lot of sense. But it does attempt to be more normal than you might guess, right? So I think it's interesting when you start putting Phantasm in its historical context, less in its storytelling context. I think on its own as a story, it really is sui generis. It's a very on its own thing. It stands by itself. But I also think that's one of the reasons why it stuck around. There's a lot of movies from that time period, some of which will be showing up in future episodes here soon, that have stuck around, but for very strange reasons. Killer Clowns from Outer Space is the one that immediately comes to mind for me. And yes, there's an episode coming about that. Just you wait. But there's also a lot of completely forgettable horror movies. I mean, just go to the store, right? Just go to any online retailer and look for horror from the late 70s and 80s. And while you are going to find the big names, you'll end up finding a lot of stuff that just never got play. And it's probably pretty good that it never got play. Or it's just so weird and niche, it doesn't have any audience now. And that's a shame, because I do think people should have a sense of the history of a genre they love, whether or not they're fully aware that there is a history there for a genre they love. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight and ask friends, siblings, Phantasm? You like it? You hate it? You a fan? You not a fan? Why? And what other hyper weird niche specific horror movies were happening at that time that I don't know about? And you can let me know by reaching out to me at thefrightlabpodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us at any time across any of our social media platforms. We're also available on YouTube. We love our comments there. We're also found on Discord. Join the conversation. It's a damn fine time. I swear I'll start doing Letterboxd again also. I promise I'll figure that out one of these days. But until then, friends, I want you to remember that The Fright Lab is written and researched by me, Lucas Yoakum, and it is produced and beaten into shape by the one and only Joseph Wren. We appreciate each and every one of you. This has been such a fun thing to do this Halloween season. We really appreciate you listening. And hey, it's time to turn off this episode and go watch a scary movie, huh?